Arnab Goswami on the debate at 9. Presented by Amity University. Powered by RP Sanjeev Goenka Group, Century Ply and B1.
Good evening and welcome. 2 days back, when I confronted the Americans on whether the USA is backing the biological weapons development and biological research in Ukraine, they got so angry. They said I was being a Russian propagandist. Today, the United Nations will be convening to discuss that charge that America is or was possibly involved in developing biological weapons on Ukrainian soil not far from the Russian border. And the American media, the American establishment wants to conceal this. They don't like this charge of having anything to do with biological weapons. Because, like always, they want to take the high moral ground. We are Americans, we don't do this. We're Americans, we're good, the rest of the world is bad. But I don't believe in the concept of Americans declaring themselves innocent. Because the Americans are the ones who have had a profound history of using the worst chemical weapons on the most innocent people. The Americans are the ones who have used a lethal mix of herbicides called Agent Orange on millions of innocent Vietnamese people, leading to miscarriages, skin cancers, birth defects, extreme congenital malformations, and they did so knowingly. And the Americans can go to any lengths, from Hiroshima to Agent Orange to spending millions on the development of biological weapons. So we cannot trust the Americans when they say, no, we are innocent, we are good, the whole world is bad. We're the good ones, they are the nasty ones. Now, if we ask them any tough questions, of late they just like to shoot off the shoulders of the suffering of the Ukrainian people. You ask them about anything, they said, you know, Ukrainian people are suffering. Of course we do. But answer the question. But they don't want to answer the questions because the answers are inconvenient. But ladies and gentlemen, they couldn't lie in their own Senate when their own senator asked their own official. And tonight, I will confront them on the growing global controversy over the developments of bioweapons in Ukraine. As you all know, this is an unedited program. It is a live program. Let us see tonight live what counterfacts or arguments they can throw back at me in their defense. We have two debates tonight. The bioweapons debate is debate number 1 and followed with debate number 2. Mercenaries for hire. Putin is calling for paid Syrian fighters. Is this all turning out to be one outsourced war? That's the most bizarre part of it. An outsourced war, and here are the headlines. This Friday evening on the debate tonight. Global emergency over Russia's bioweapons claim. The UNSC calls an urgent meeting. China jumps into the biolabs. Global controversy demands an investigation. US intelligence agencies admit America assisted Ukraine on biotechnology, warn of a false flag operation. Putin officially invites Syrian fighters to fight alongside Russia. Thousands are responding. Mercenaries, private armies, volunteers, they flock to be in Ukraine to be part of the great outsourced war. And Putin and Lukashenko meet in Moscow. Republic is live from Ukraine and also the Russian bloc tonight. And ladies and gentlemen, the real big controversy is the biolabs controversy in Ukraine, which has really blown up tonight. What are these biolabs? Why were there 16 of them? What funding or assistance is coming in from America? Now, statements coming in from America admit to assisting Ukraine in its bio programs. But there is no complete clarity yet. There are more questions than answers. Even China, ironically, which has much to answer itself, is now demanding an investigation. What is the truth? Let's debate.
Foreign fighters are fighting in Ukraine. The Ukrainians have suffered big setbacks to their campaigns. Air bases hit, depots struck, massive casualties on both sides, and foreign fighters have entered the warfare here. Over the last few days, we have been cutting hundreds of videos of volunteers who are poured in from different parts of the world through land borders.
Мы подтверждаем те вскрывшиеся в ходе проведения специальной военной операции на Украине факты, которые свидетельствуют об экстренной зачистке киевским режимом следов военно-биологических программ. Они реализовывались Киевом при финансировании Соединенных Штатов Америки. Ни о каком мирном использовании, научных целях во благо мира, развития, конечно, речи не идет.
I'm reporting from Poland, where the American focus has been. NATO meetings, series of engagements and increased deployments show that there is something happening. America's response, not once but twice.
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which in fact we are now quite concerned Russian troops, Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of.
As you're all aware, Russia has been laying out this argument for a number of months now about how there are these labs in Ukraine that are developing chemical and biological weapons, that the U.S. is involved, that they've discovered it, and they've been making that argument for a period of time, and it's the argument they usually make before they use that kind of stuff themselves.
Today, Belarusian president met with Putin and said that Ukraine was provoking his country as well. This has come on a day when China has backed the Russia's bioweapon claim. So what is the truth? First, we listen into Belarusian president, and then we listen to China's stand.
Не был нанесен превентивный удар по позициям. 4 позиции, я сейчас покажу, карту привез. Они бы атаковали наши войска Беларуси и России, которые были на учениях. Поэтому не мы развязали эту войну, у нас совесть чиста. Хорошо, что начали. Биологическое оружие, самые большие электростанции атомные. И все это было готово взорваться.
国际社会对美国的生物军事活动早就有严重关切。美国在其境内的德特里克堡基地，在境外的336个生物实验室到底干了什么？是否符合禁止生物武器公约的规定？国际社会对此一无所知。这不是1、2句话就能应付过去的。把国际社会的关切说成是虚假信息，更不是一种负责任的态度。
From the side questioning the Americans tonight, Andrew K.P. Leung from Hong Kong, giving the China perspective, Farshid Bagharian, Eurasia Director of the West Asia Research Center from Tehran, Nikiti Menkovich, Director of the Eurasian Analytical Club from Moscow, Sergei Strokin is a journalist and columnist for the Kommersant Publishing House from Moscow, Global Affairs Analyst Jonathan Wachtel is joining us from New York, Peter Kuznick, Professor at the American University from Washington. Aaron Mehta is Editor-in-Chief of Breaking Defense. I'd like to start by asking Christine Parthmore, who's CEO of the Council on Strategic Risks and former senior advisor to the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear, Chemical and Biological Defense Programs in the U.S. Department of Defense. Now, I've been asking this question, Ms. Parthmore, and the answer from the Americans is, do you know that the Ukrainians are suffering? I've asked them this question many times and they say that's not relevant. The bigger fact is that the Ukrainians are suffering. Well, we know the Ukrainians are suffering, but that has nothing to do with my question. Senator Marco Rubio's specific question to the Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, was, does Ukraine have any biological weapons research facilities? To which the answer from Mr. Haines was, we do not assess whether Ukraine is pursuing either biological or nuclear weapons. That's not either a yes or a no. Secondly, a same question is put to Victoria Nuland, and the question is very specific. Does Ukraine have biological weapons? The answer was a very carefully phrased, Ukraine has biological research facilities, after which Senator Rubio himself gave her the exit clause by putting the blame on Russia potentially doing a false flag operation in the future. Ms. Parthmore, clearly the American government is not being able to deny the fact that Ukraine has biological research facilities which can possibly be used in biological warfare as well. That's quite clear. I'd like your response, please.
Yeah, let me be absolutely clear in very direct language. We do not believe that the Ukrainians have biological weapons programs. They have been a champion for non-proliferation since they became an independent nation. I absolutely do not believe that there are any biological weapons activities that have been conducted at any of these laboratories as assisted by the United States or by the Ukrainians.
What are biolabs? What are the biolabs which are there in Ukraine? Can you tell us more about what these biolabs are?
Absolutely. So one of the original impetuses for setting up these laboratories in the former Soviet Union was because of the Soviet biological weapons program. They had huge industrial scale biological weapons facilities in places like Kazakhstan. And we've been concerned over the years, including because they established and expanded these programs after signing the biological weapons program. We've been very concerned that Russia may still have a biological weapons program. But that's not the primary purpose. That's one driver of setting up these laboratories.
But what are the biolabs? What you have been, Ms. Parthmore, what are the biolabs? There are 16 of them. 16 of them.
So they
on America, on Ukrainian soil. Am I correct?
Correct. Just as labs around India
what do they conduct
research for public health purposes, they conduct public health research. Similar to labs all around the world that do public health research.
Now that's very generic. Can you be more specific than that? Can you be more specific than that? What do they study?
Absolutely. They study influenzas and other pathogens that have the risk of affecting humans and animals and livestock and agriculture. They essentially serve as an early warning system
and does
for
this
detecting
study,
disease outbreaks.
Does this study involve developing pathogens as well?
No.
Then how do you know what pathogens there are? And why is there such panic? What are the pathogens which, as it has been said out here, that if these specific pathogens get away, then they can be very dangerous, which means inside those biolabs in Ukraine, there are some dangerous pathogens. And all of this is happening under the DTRA, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, right? And the DTRA actually got millions for low visibility chemical and biological search that would meet, quote unquote, specific combatant command requirements, which means they were being used for a military purpose, which means therefore, and I am quoting information that has come from Pentagon, that means millions have gone into the development of low visibility chemical and biological research that will meet specific combatant command requirements, which means they're being used for the US military.
There's work that's occurring for defensive purposes as well as public health purposes. The U.S. Department of Defense has more than 100
No, but they're being used for military purposes. See, that is very different. Ms. Parthmore, I think you need to explain this, because you just tried to tell me some time back, in fact about a minute back, that this was for public health, whereas I have come to you and I have just confronted you and said that there has been increased funding for the Nimble Elder program of the Defense Threat Research Agency, which is driven by, quote unquote, classified Department of Defense guidance. And this is aimed with low visibility, which means the world should not know, chemical and biological research for military purposes. But you just said public health. This doesn't sound like public health to me at all. What are you doing in Ukraine? Ms. Parthma, would you care to clarify, please? Because you have used biological weapons and chemical weapons in the past. We're getting very concerned, please. Can you tell us what exactly is going on in the biolabs in Ukraine?
The United States ceased to have biological and chemical weapons programs after signing on to the Biological Weapons Convention and the Chemical Weapons Convention. This work is defensive and for public health purposes. As I've tried to explain,
no, but for military use? But for military use? But for military use?
There's no offense.
But is it for military use?
Offensive military. There is no offense. The military includes humans that can be
you're
infected
telling me
by
it's not
infectious
offensive, but yes, for military use. So you're particularly concerned about so it's for military use, and I want to tell you also, I also want to tell you that International UN Biological Weapons Convention was open for signatures since 1972. And US and Russia are depository governments of this treaty. Why in 2005 did America enter into a separate agreement with Ukraine on the non-proliferation of biological weapons? What's going on?
Because
you see, Ms. Parthma, you can't dismiss all that Moscow is saying, Moscow is bad, the rest of the world is bad. I want to tell you that did Article 7 of this agreement subject information to the law of Ukraine on state secret to bypass the Biological Weapons Convention, which means you had a separate agreement with Ukraine to bypass a global UN Biological Weapons Convention. You wanted to keep something secret. What was that?
False. That's false. None of these agreements that we have.
That's not false. You can't dismiss it as false. I would remind you, it is not false. It is not false. Ms. Parthma, please don't say it's false, because by saying it's false, you are committing an act of falsehood. There is an agreement signed between the United States of America and Ukraine. In fact, I can tell you it was signed at Kiev on the 29th of August, 2005. You cannot dismiss it as false.
It does not circumvent any international treaties whatsoever. This cooperation with Ukraine and other countries,
I can tell you that point number 4 of this agreement says that during implementation of this agreement, access to certain information and technology considered state secret of Ukraine, unquote, may be provided to the US Department of Defense in accordance with the provisions of the law of Ukraine on state secret. And therefore, and everyone on the screen, obviously America is doing something extremely secretive on chemical and biological weapons with Ukraine. And I'm absolutely justified in asking you what you're doing. You can't turn around and tell me Ukrainians are good, Americans are bad. You ask the questions, you're a propagandist. No, you have to tell us. And you absolutely know this. And if there is no lab, please explain why ahead of the breakout of tensions in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine in 2021, the Ministry of Defense of the Military Command received mobile laboratories for epidemiological surveillance.
You just answered the question. They're for epidemiological surveillance purposes. They're for understanding.
No, I didn't answer the question. I feel no, I didn't. What specific obligation do you have to construct biolabs in Ukraine?
Listen, I understand that transparency is important, and that's why
you constructed 2 biolabs, one in Kiev and one in Odessa.
There are regular visits from the WHO and other international visitors and experts from other countries that visit these laboratories, see the work that is going on, discuss the work with the people there.
What are these laboratories? I'm opening this up for debate now. What are these laboratories? It's not adding up to me. I'm sorry. You have a 30-year Defense Department program called the Cooperative Threat Reduction Program, which was formed right after the collapse of the Soviet Union. You have a separate agreement in 2005 with Ukraine, right? And you are the ones who used Agent Orange. You actually contaminated sugar shipments to Cuba. And there is a history of the use of unpurified butyl esters, right? 2,4-D, 2,4,5-T, Agent Orange, small variable proportions. You started to use it. You knew how much will damage plants and you knew how much will damage human beings. And you know how terrible it was. You had color-coded bands. You called it Agent White, Agent Purple, Agent Pink, Agent Green, and Agent Orange, depending on how badly you wanted people to suffer. So I have absolutely every right to ask you that what you're doing in Ukraine can't be washed away by saying, can't tell you more about it. I'd like a response, please. I think Sergei Strokin, perhaps, Nikita Menkovich Farshid, Bagaria, and anyone who likes to respond to that, please. Farshid, would you like to come in? You're hearing this.
Okay.
I think there are more questions than answers I'm getting.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay.
I'd like
it's my turn
to say a few words about current situation. First of all, I'm really sorry about this. Yes. As I said, I'm deeply sorry about this girl from United States, because she hardly know what to lie in this situation. First, she's talking about public health. Next, she's telling that it is for the defense reasons. Of course, all of us clearly understand. It's a military program. It's a program funded by the United States Department of Defense. There are military officers who sent for such laboratories to make those secret works. In 2018, group of European biologists published an article analyzing the work of the United States Army in the biological field. And they clearly show that there is no citizen, there is no public health reasons for such investigation. The only reason is the preparing of biological weapons. It is the reason why United States need all these laboratories in the countries neighboring with Russia and China.
Let me get it, Farshid, also. Let me get it, Farshid, also. And viewers, there's a very interesting background to this. And if you go and study the backgrounds of this, you'll realize that there are documents. Apparently Barack Obama, when he was an Illinois senator, was part of the development of this this level 3 biosafety lab in the Ukrainian city of Odessa. My only question here is, how come it is 16 biolabs in Ukraine, A, and all of them apparently deal with very lethal, very dangerous pathogens or viruses? Why Ukraine? Why 16 of them? Okay. And why so recently? Farshid.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. I believe that Mr. Putin and Mr. Biden will no longer dishonor themselves with losing vehicles, prestige, and soldiers, and something like that. And they are operating the status of war right now. If you can see, the balance of power is shifting to balance of threat, and this is the fact of threat. Because I believe that this war is not terrible enough for world to be unified against Russia. And this is another scenario is written before. And they are doing this scenario very preciously. So the fact is, this undercover or underground labs are in Ukraine for many years. But the using of chemical weapons is another subject. Because we are the doctrine, war doctrine of Russia is now applying is the Gerasimov, and Gerasimov is legitimizing Russia to use any kind of mass destruction of weapon. So this is the fact. If somebody pushed Mr. Putin to start this war and to involve in this trap of war, definitely for the next scenario, they will push Mr. Putin to use chemical weapon. And this is another scenario, because look at the scenario, look at the region right now. Mercenaries from all over the world is coming to this scenario, from the Ukraine part and from the Russian part. The fact is only the hazardous is not chemical weapon, is using the mercenaries, and they are moving the ethnics and using the threat of using the chemical weapon would expedite the evacuation of the Ukrainian from their homeland. And this is the fact. And we are now facing a threat, not a chemical weapon attack, but the chemical weapon attack is inevitable in coming days. Yeah.
Some questions come here, and I think that the important thing, I'd like to go to Aaron Mehta, is not to look at this in terms of who's right, who's permanently right, and who's permanently wrong. The problem happens when a complex situation like this, we say Russians are permanently bad, Americans are permanently good, or Americans are permanently good, or Russians are permanently bad. As a developing news story, Aaron, my question is, why does the Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, refuse to divulge the details of America's role in the biological defense research program? If it is not about weapons, then why the secrecy?
Sure. So first off, obviously, I'm a journalist. I don't speak for the American government. Wouldn't claim to speak for the American people who can barely speak for, in one voice on anything these days. Look, the Pentagon has a number of programs which are classified. The American government has a number of programs classified, as does the Indian government, the Russian government, the Iranian government. This is a typical thing with governments across the world, where if a program is classified, you can't talk about it in public setting. That's just a legal rule. So Avril Haines isn't going to get up there and say, well, since you asked, Senator, here's everything that we've been working on and here's all the details. She legally can't. She would go to jail. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is just going back to an earlier question you had, Arnab, about combatant command and what that means for the military. A combatant command is a regional area. It doesn't mean a thing that's used for combat. It means essentially somebody who is in charge of monitoring the region for the military. So there's a combatant commander in charge of the U.S. Indo-Pacific relationship that India falls under, quote unquote, that combatant commander. So in this case, as one was saying earlier, this is a situation where we have Pentagon has many programs about biological defense and biological safety because they're concerned about what happens if a biological weapon is used against American troops. That's the kind of research that the Pentagon has very openly conducted for years. It's why when there was a big smallpox outbreak in the last decade, the U.S. military was able to help out with that. So that's a kind of typical thing that happens. I can't speak to these 16 labs in detail. It's not something that I know, frankly, from my experience, a lot of in depth on. I do know that, again, if we're talking about something that was signed in 2005 as a statement, if something is publicly signed in 2005, nobody's trying to hide anything.
No, you see, there's a backdrop to it. First of all, Aaron, I think I find it quite interesting that you are shooting off the shoulders of Iran to justify what America is doing, and that's incredible. That you're in Washington and you're saying Tehran does it. A, B. If you can please, since you mentioned my country, India, can you mention one country or one foreign? One minute. Just one minute. You must understand this very unique situation where you have 26 labs like this and 16 of them, which means you've got about 70% of these labs on Ukrainian soil. A. Third point, you are fully aware as a defense journalist expert that 80% of all the defense spending that Ukraine has been doing is funded by the Americans. So you have significant leverage over Ukraine. So if they were developing something that could be lethal, you could have stopped them. You are talking about it being dangerous now. My last question to you is, Aaron, and do think about this, that if this is for the safety of the world that you're carrying out this research, then how can you be worried about the Russians gaining control of it? I mean, at the most, your concern should be that the Russians will contribute to public health. Obviously, you got something else going on there. It can't be as innocuous as that.
This isn't me saying this.
And then one last thing before I complete. Yeah, America rejected the protocol to strengthen the Biological Weapons Convention in 2001, and effectively you ensured there's no real deterrence on biological weapons proliferation. So you are the suspect here. You as in America. America would be the prime suspect because America rejected the protocol to strengthen the Biological Weapons Convention in 2001.
Well, I was 16 in 2001, Arnab, so I certainly had nothing to do with that at that time. Here's what I can say. We know for a fact Russia has used biological weapons in an act of assassination in the UK in the last several years. We know they've done research, as you pointed out, America in the past has done research on biological weapons. This is not something that anybody's going to dispute. We're not talking about the past, though. We're talking about what's going on right now. And right now, we have plenty of reason to believe that these labs are exactly what they say they are.
It's impossible to believe because they are saying one thing and doing another. In any case, America was shipping anthrax from an army facility in the past.
Officials from the WHO visit these facilities on a regular basis, as do international experts. There is plenty of transparency and public knowledge that the activities in these centers is entirely peaceful. After
what the WHO did on COVID, you still believe in the WHO? Ms. Parthmore, I don't. Nobody in the world does. But I'll get Sergei Stroker in on this. This is an interesting case.
Absolutely.
16 biolabs on Ukrainian soil. Nobody denies it. Sergei. 16.
There are biological labs all over the world, everywhere. Every hospital has a laboratory in it that's a biological laboratory.
In Ukraine, Mr. Goswami, thanks for having me and thanks for picking up this important subject. This story comes as a dramatic turnaround in the whole Ukrainian saga, and I believe that probably it would serve as an eye-opener, not only for Indian audience, but for the world. Ironically, that now enormous pressure is put on Russia as we are involved in a blame game, that we are washing sanctions, but it is we Russians who are trying to do this job, to prevent the disaster, biological weapon disaster, to spread over vast Eurasian territory. So this is not a small thing. And just look how evasive are the statements by American officials. You see, actually, what Victoria Nuland said, what other American officials said, and our American guests here participating in this program also. I understand them. It's very difficult to deny that because already what is revealed, and I'm sure the more information is a pipeline, but still what is already revealed by Russia's defense ministry, it is very detailed oriented. This is not propaganda. They have already picked up some samples, some documents, and if you happen to look into those statements, you see, they describe what specific, pathogens we used, mice, wild birds, everything, you see. So all in all, it seems that probably Ukraine was on the brink of creating what is described as dirty bomb. That some time ago, there was a talk about atomic bomb for poor, you see. So now similar case could have happened to biological weapons. And actually, this is not a biological weapon as such, because if you have just spread of deadly virus, then you can understand what happened. Look at what happened with coronavirus. So similar thing we can have. And let me also add to that probably you missed that, but similar story was with Georgia. And ex-president Mikhail Saakashvili, who hates President Putin, when he was cornered by his political rivals in Georgia, he said that I am going to reveal some secrets over Georgia. So the whole story is not about Ukraine itself, but the whole story is about America using post-Soviet space, you see, to use it as a mushrooming place for those labs. So this is not a small thing, as you understand. And I hope that this topic would be picked up by independent journalists, scientists, those who are not involved in propaganda war, just to understand what is at stake, because at stake is survival of humanity. Can you imagine now refugees are moving, you see, in numbers, in big numbers. And if all of a sudden this deadly virus is spread through those densely populated areas, through those crowds, how the whole story of alleged Russia's attack would be overshadowed by this, keep fingers crossed it never happened, but still disaster.
This is becoming very big.
This is a scenario.
No, so I'd like Jonathan to come in on this, Jonathan, you're joining us from New York, and the questions which are being asked are quite reasonable, because after all, during the Korean War, the US military destroyed evidence of the use of bioweapons in the Army Chemical Corps, and the Chemical Corps was the branch of the US Armed Forces responsible for the manufacture and supply of biological weapons. So there is a history that the Americans have. And I think that, we all know enough English to know that, you can call bioweapons development programs as biological research and get away with it. But there is a 1925 Geneva Protocol, which has been violated by the US in the Second World War when they started the biological weapons program. Did that ever shut down? Or do they simply call it biological research now? And also, Jonathan, look at the way in which the question was so focused on biological weapons. And the moment Victoria Nuland started stuttering and searching for words, and she said, we have a biological research program, the senator himself came to her aid and gave her an exit route by saying, if something wrong happens now, will we blame the Russians for it? It's all very suspicious, Jonathan. I think some serious questions. What do you think?
I don't think it's suspicious at all. And to be honest with you, this entire segment is very troubling. Look, biological weapons are horrific. They should not exist on the face of the earth, period. That's why the United States is a signatory of the OPCW, and that's why a lot of nations that really are appalled by the prospect of use of biological warfare is something that's just a standard. Now, I've listened to my Russian friends say a lot of spin, a lot of rhetoric about how horrible the United States is. Look, Russia's got one heck of a history. Wait, let me just speak. I've had to sit through, my friend, I've had to sit through you speaking endlessly, trying to throw Georgia into this conversation. Let me speak.
Okay, all right. Sergey, let him respond. Sergey, let him respond.
Be respectful. Stop your spin and be respectful. Stop the spin. Offense in situations of war, rhetoric like this is an offensive move. It is often the best defense. If we put the spotlight on the Russian Federation, even on India in this space, and the number of labs you have conducting whatever you're doing, it would be deeply uncomfortable. People in glass houses should not throw stones.
No, please do so.
I totally
No,
understand.
One second. Jonathan, please do so.
Let me speak.
Jonathan, I'm not going to be trouble. There won't be trouble. But what will happen is, no, 1 second. Just see, listen here, Jonathan. Just let me intervene for a moment. You see what happens is, Jonathan, standard debating tactic. I can reveal everything about you. Now, if you are making a claim like that, and you can say it'll be deeply troubling, which is some kind of a veiled threat, I suggest you carry out the threat. Please tell me, where is India developing a bioweapons program, including, you just said in your sentence, the places where it's being carried out. So I suggest right now, Jonathan, instead of carrying out empty threats on my country, you name where it's going on. I have given you enough information about what's happened in Ukraine. Carry out your threat.
Why are you taking...
Don't make it a vacuous threat on my program. Okay, I don't take vacuous threats at all.
Take it easy.
You're going to have to respond to that. You're going to have to follow up.
Can we have...
No, I'm very easy. But you're going to have to follow up. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm very relaxed. But you take it easy. You take it easy and tell me where India is carrying out bioweapons facilities and which island, where in the world we have biolabs. You tell me now. You follow up.
No one's making a claim that you have a weaponized biological program. I'm saying that there are areas of research
there, you now do a U-turn. Now you're doing a U-turn.
For any country
in India, we call that a U-turn.
Can I speak? Please. Can I speak?
Yeah, but without the verbal bling.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, but without the verbal bling and the vacuous charges. Yes, you can.
I said that it's very convenient.
Bling, I said bling, without the verbal bling and the vacuous charge, B-L-I-N-G. Thank you. I'm not stepping on you. You made a vacuous charge against my country. I took you on directly.
If you allow me to speak, we'll be able to have a constructive conversation.
Yeah, you better not.
Rather than this strange...
No, I'm very constructive, but don't get aggressive with me.
Speak. I'm not getting aggressive. I'm asking you to please allow me to speak. Okay? Some pretty grotesque claims have been made here, some accusations that will be proven out to be probably unsubstantiated, and maybe there will be some discomfort that comes across in some ways because you're talking about the sovereign affairs of a nation of Ukraine and their concerns. Okay, you can't just willy-nilly come on air and speak to the public about whatever another country is doing when you're in agreement with it. It doesn't work like that. That's not how diplomacy works. That's not how the world works. That's not how relations work. Now, I do want to say that the Ukraine has a history, and I was there to witness it, of not wanting to have weapons of mass destruction. I was a journalist on the ground in Kiev in the early 90s, in which the decision was taken by that country to do away with the third largest arsenal of nuclear weapons in the world. They are not a nation that believes in wiping out other countries. So to make such claims like that is just completely ridiculous. So I really would like it if this conversation would tone down a lot of notches, because it's extremely convenient when Russia is raging a war inside Ukraine, another country, for there to be
I tell you one thing. I'll get okay. So I won't. But as you just said,
no, wait,
Jonathan.
I need to point out one other thing here, because the only country
you're getting very worked up, Jonathan, without any necessity
of weapons of mass destruction. No, it's extremely necessary, because you laid stuff during the Vietnam War, which was many decades ago. But let's talk about Syria and what went down in Syria and the use of chemical weapons within that country. which other country was involved in that conflict. Also, my colleague in Washington mentioned the sarin gas attack. Did that matter? Who did that? Okay, and then my colleague also mentioned the poisoning of various Russians with radioactive isotopes.
And I want to go to two other guests, please.
Also chemical weapons.
But I just want to get to two other guests. I'll go to two other guests because I don't want to run short of time. I'll just tell you that I remember that there were low-flying aircraft which kept throwing herbicides over the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese forces just because you guys were losing. So I know that you're very experienced in that regard. So don't tell me what you've done. We know what you've done. I want Andrew to come in. I want Peter Kuznick to come in. First Andrew and Peter Kuznick, please. Can we have both sides? Who goes first? Andrew? And then Peter.
Thank you. Well, thank you. It is instructive that even President Biden refused to speak on it. This suggests that what a huge embarrassment this discovery is to Americans' credibility. And then, of course, it is a fact that biological research laboratories have existed in the United States for a long, long time in the form of Fort Detrick, D-I-E-T-R-I-C-H, in Maryland. All you need to do is right at this moment, use your computer, Google Fort Detrick, and you'll find that it was at that time, immediately after the Second World War, it got a lot of bioweapon information from Japan. And that information was transferred to Fort Detrick, making it the biggest biolab research laboratory in the world.
Andrew.
So there's a history behind it. And as far as China is concerned, there was an irony, because over the coronavirus I know, but crisis, all these allegations that it all originated in a biolab in Wuhan was fabricated in the United States in the first place. So there is a sense of irony there. But I think that this is right.
Come on now. One second. You are still blocking the arrival of a team from WHO investigating into the origins of the coronavirus pandemic, which could have unearthed the reality of what was happening in Wuhan. Why didn't you let independent journalists and teams go to Wuhan? Why do you get psyched about it? Why don't you talk about how your researchers were sick before the first official COVID-19 case? Your Central Military Mission funded projects. Your 2015 paper suggesting the use of man-made use of virus as a bioweapon. So China, please, I'll let Peter come in. Peter's looking amused. Why, Peter?
Well, this is quite a discussion. Arnab, I've never been accused of being an apologist for the United States. I condemn the use of herbicides during the Vietnam War. I condemn the America's lies about weapons of mass destruction before the invasion of Iraq. I condemn the invasion of Afghanistan, invasion of Libya. What's going on here, though, is very, very dangerous, because it seems to me that Russia may be doing the same thing the U.S. did to justify its invasion of Iraq. I'm not an expert on biological warfare, but I did get in touch with some of my friends who are experts, because I wanted to find out what they say is going on. And what they've assured me is that the U.S. is not working with Ukraine to develop biological weapons, that the Russians released a list of what they found at the first lab that they investigated, and it was a list of pathogens. There were about a dozen, not a single virus, nothing like pneumonia, diphtheria, E. coli. They were all bacteria, no viruses, and that none of these labs are under direct U.S. control. Now, I'm very skeptical about claims the U.S. makes. So I wanted to look into this. But what worries me is really the danger of this spiraling into a world war in which nuclear weapons would be used. I see the threats that Putin's been making about the use of nuclear.
I think that worries me too, Peter. No, that worries me too, Peter. But what worries me greatly is that America is so concerned about doing biological research. I truly believe they should do it in West Virginia or Michigan or Minnesota Or if you can't do it in America, do it in a country like Toronto. Why don't you have 16 biolabs in Toronto? Why choose Ukraine? We don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, on the other side, on debate number 2 after the bio-war face-off, is the charge of this becoming an outsourced war? Putin says now, I'm going to get the Syrians in. Is this completely outsourced? Is this the way warfare will happen in the future? More on the other side.